I am unashamed. What about you?
I appreciate everyone's patience. You got to realize this is day 2 of the split, and it takes me a while to reboot. Because
Reboot to just normal living, or
well, I mean, you think about it.
The
Now, Phil,
the word is acclimated.
yeah,
You,
but in the technology world, I'm rebooting the
Yep.
sensors because you
Reacclimate.
just duck hunt for 2 weeks,
yeah.
but I have a life, I have responsibilities. I'm still doing stuff. And so then you throw in duck hunting with that. That's why I was getting all my words messed up. I couldn't think straight.
he was land blasting.
I look up.
During duck season, you get up a lot of mornings dazed and confused.
I actually told Missy about the land blasting versus
Lambasted.
lambasted.
Lambasted, yeah.
And she's like, that is so embarrassing for you. So, let me tell
you butchered the English language.
It's falling right
you know
in
what?
line.
In the redneck
Mom
world,
loved it.
It is funny, it's acceptable, and we have thick skin. I claim to be good at nothing.
Maybe we'll put that in there too.
So the
the
verse-
man who was good at nothing.
Yeah, there's a certain talent in that.
Yeah.
So I do want to give you a couple of positive vibes that happened. So I had a technology issue where my phone upgraded. I think I shared this before. And the volume doesn't work. And it caused me to be late a couple times and miss a morning duck hunt, which had never happened before. So here's what you do. You say, okay, well, you need a new phone. Yeah, do you know what phones cost? You could buy a shotgun for the price of a phone.
This phone right here, this is an old one, but a new one like this,
Boom, boom, boom.
about $1,200.
I'm glad we have
$1,200,
great
about right?
companies who have
Yeah.
donated their weapons that we are to shoot to prove they are the greatest.
Let me tell you a happy story.
Nelly.
Let me tell you a happy story, Phil. So what I do is, you say, what do you do when things like this happen? So I went to a couple of stores and I was looking for an alarm clock.
Oh boy.
Guess what? Tough find.
I know it. Ask your mother. Your mother in the last year has purchased at least 20 clocks, trying to figure out how you set the alarm, where it'll go.
All right, well,
And
listen
she
to
says,
this.
"Can you figure this out?" And look, I've got them and tried them. I couldn't figure it out.
Let me give you a riddle here. So I find it
There
at
was
a
no
place.
on and off.
Look, I found it at a place which this place also was one of the top 5 reasons why I moved from Austin. The lack of having one of these places.
I already know what you're going to say.
Can you name this place?
I know what it is. Dad doesn't know.
It's a little place called Dollar General.
I knew that's what
Look,
you were
in our area, we have one pretty much every half a mile.
about every half a mile.
And I couldn't find one in Austin. You know what?
So what does
I-
it mean when your father has never been to that dollar? Because what is it? A dollar you get in? Dollar.
Well,
the most you spend is a dollar.
At one time,
Dollar General means this stuff is cheap.
yep.
It sounds like
Yep.
it, but I've never been in a Dollar
the-
General, so I don't know
I
what
think that's how they started, but they've sort of expanded their deal, and they've got. I mean, I go there all the time. I'm the
Hey,
same
this-
way.
Do you tend to spend more than a dollar?
You spend more than $1.
Well, yeah, but I think their principle is, and this disclaimer, I actually own the Dollar General stock, so I'm a part owner in the company technically. Now I have a little bit, but it's something.
I'm feeling better about the 20 clocks Miss Kay has purchased if they went the Dollar General route, because that's some little gravy
she
money.
probably
coulda
needs
got
to
out.
go
Well,
to
listen,
Dollar
so
General.
listen to this story. So I could have spent $1,200 on a new phone, or I go to Dollar General and for $4.75, and I think that's the Dollar General. You spend a few dollars,
Yeah.
and I got an alarm
Which,
clock.
by the way, it's better to be branded as Dollar General, which you like you say you could expand. Unlike the Dollar Tree, where everything's $1, they just had to rebrand to the $1.25 tree because of inflation. So
well, people are after this market. There's another chain called Five Below, and that doesn't mean it's cold. It means most of the stuff in here is below $5.
Really?
Just a little factoid.
So they try to keep everything they have in there
And look,
below $5.
Dollar General is actually expanding. They're going to have they just opened up a new idea where they're going to have like up to $5. I don't think that's the name, but they're playing with that because of inflation, I guess.
have you stopped at the new one that's not quite to our house with the
course.
food in there?
I made a courtesy call to check it out because I thought.
So when you walked in,
They have actually produce.
just a
and food.
question.
Here's what's crazy.
If it were me, and if I had ever walked into one of them, which I haven't.
Yeah.
So when you walk into this thing, Dollar General, what kind of clientele? Just
Oh,
if
our kind of people.
People who
you
spend
started right to left and gazed,
okay.
who would you? What kind of clientele?
People who spend a lot of time outside, thus the slang redneck.
That's right.
They're burned. Like if you look at my neck, it's a different color.
So these are working people who are in there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
and so
And it's in their communities.
I'm saying working, but I'm being gentle with that term.
well,
Well,
you stay in town.
okay.
That's right.
So where's the alarm clock? Aisle 4 past the. Okay, they knew exactly. They have alarm clocks. $4.75. So here's the funny part. So I take this. It's a little petite. You got to remember, this is under $5.
Are these battery operated or plug them in?
Took one battery, one AA battery.
One AA
I
battery.
inserted the battery. I set the alarm, and I waited with anticipation for the next duck season day to
Yep.
see what happens. This was crazy. So when it went off, it was a high pitched sound, and it was kind of like, what do you call it when you're on the operating table and they have the thing. You don't want it to go flat line, but it blip blip beep
Yep.
Oh,
beep beep
yeah.
beep beep
I
beep.
got you, I got
So
you.
it starts off with a beep 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 high pitch,
Yeah.
which woke me up, but then it accelerates in its passion.
So it's like, hurry, you
Well,
gotta
it's
get up.
like goes to the flat line. Beep 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 beep. And I thought,
You're
how
dead.
clever is this? If this doesn't wake you up, you are dead. So look, my dogs start barking when they hear it because it's a high pitched.
It awakened the dogs.
It awakened the dog and aroused them. And I thought, for $4.75, I have now got not only an alarm clock, but an alarm clock that triggers a reaction from my dog. So if this doesn't wake
Then
me
they're
up,
gonna start
then the
barking.
dog.
Oh, yeah.
And look, when I took Biggin outside, the whole neighborhood of dogs were howling. I thought this is the greatest alarm clock ever. Not only have I awakened myself, all dogs, and the neighborhood.
Just think of the research that had to be done where this wakes up not only you and the personnel located near you. This goes all the way to where the dogs are lying outside under the shrubbery.
in the whole neighborhood.
And I spent $4.75.
It was under $5.
I literally felt like I had stolen something. I wanted to go back up there and throw in another $5.
Well, you did better than your mother because she missed that one because I don't like the idea that if you're going to go to sleep and if you want to get up at 9 o'clock, if it's 8 to 9 when you put that, it'll start beeping. You're 12 hours away, but you're still within 8 to 9. I'm going to go sleep. I want you to get me up at 8:45 tomorrow, but
You've lost
it
me
won't
here.
let you do it. As soon as you do that, it goes beep, 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 beep. It starts what you're talking about. I said, why wouldn't they just wait? That it's just 15 minutes, but you got to get past 9 if you want to set it to get you up before 9, 8 to 9. It's a problem.
Yeah, you lost me on that. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
If you want to set your alarm clock, it costs $4
Okay.
to wake you up in the morning at 9 o'clock.
Yes.
You have to wait till after 9 o'clock the night before to set it, or it will go off as soon as you put it on. You sit it down.
Oh, there's an AM PM issue.
Yeah, big time. I want to set it. It's 10 to 9. Wake me up at 9 o'clock. Beep, 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 beep. I got to wait. I got to sit there and wait the other 10 minutes till it gets through ringing.
So Dad's having to wait till
the way this sounds is you're sleeping more than 12. What if you sleep? I don't think they figured somebody was going to sleep more than 12 hours. Gee whiz. Oh, we've had a podcast first.
Y'all say I don't laugh enough. I'm laughing at this because, yeah, there are some individuals.
Wow.
I'm just amazed Dad having to wait till past a certain time to set his alarm clock.
Oh, yeah. All the
they're
time.
sitting there. Kay's on the couch, Phil's on the chair. They're having to wait till after 9 to set it if they wanted to get up at 9.
That's correct.
All right, I got it.
It's a problem.
Well, that's a problem I did not know was there in our society.
Yeah.
But they do have electronic ones, Dad, that you can set it anytime you want to AM or PM. And so it could be 16 hours before, but you put 9 AM.
Okay.
And it's going to go off.
Yeah, but these don't have that.
Yeah, that's what you got.
You know what's crazy is me and you are the only two people, because I had a phone problem and you don't have a cell phone. Everybody else, they're like, what are they talking about?
Do they set cell phones to wake them up?
Oh, Phil, that's what I use. But when my volume quit working.
Well, just think about a guy. I'm lost in a wilderness because all of these cell phones are taking care of time, but I've never purchased a cell phone. So, so I'm not tuned into that at all.
I recommend going to Dollar General and getting you another alarm clock. Because mine, I didn't have to wait, but I didn't.
Dan ordered them. Dan, the butler, he ordered.
Don't order it. You can drive 5 miles.
Well, I didn't know that.
Or half a mile.
He said, I got to order them. So he ordered 2, and he brought them in there. I said, this one I can figure out to tell Miss Kay how it works. I said, you can set this thing. I said, turn the alarm on, get it ready. And I said, it'll ring at the time it says it will. You know.
So if you're wondering what this has to do with the Bible, I thought about this because when we got to Matthew 23, it's like Jesus' alarm clock went off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, alarm. Beep, 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 beep.
Think about it.
This group of people, Pharisees, teachers of the law.
It presents a problem because if you're looking forward in the morning, one of the persons involved is me. I'm getting up at 4 a.m. Mm-hmm. Miss Kay says, I want to get up at 8:30 a.m. Well,
because she's a night owl.
Yeah, I've had 1 clock over here. Yep. So it's got to where now I have a clock if you want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
And she's got a clock.
She has a clock that says, no, I want to wait to 8:30. You have to have 2
I
o'clock.
don't mean this to be insulting, but they actually sell an alarm clock that has 2 options for times.
Do 2 different
you can
times.
set one. On your phone, you can do like up to, I guess, infinity. You can set multiple numbers.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Yeah.
But if your volume doesn't work, it's my alarm goes off on my phone.
I'll be the first one to tell you my problem is ignorance of the issue.
I think our listeners.
I'm not used to. I don't have a watch. I never owned one, so I've got these devices. 4 o'clock. Most of the time, I get up at like 5 to 4. Well, there you go.
That is the actual alarm. Oh, you set an alarm?
I set the alarm. See, while we were talking, I set the alarm for 2 minutes.
Yeah, how is that going to wake somebody up?
Well, you can make it louder.
No, that wouldn't wake Phil up. That would just make him dream about being on a beach looking for some woods to hunt in.
Yeah, well, you can make it different sounds. That was just the sound of mine. I guess that automatically does.
But I have no sound.
Because you don't have your volume down.
Well, I have a reoccurring dream all the time.
Hang on, Dad, before you tell that, let's take a break. So right now, somebody out there may be looking at your house and thinking it looks exactly like something they'd like to have for themselves. The bad news is these days, there are ways to make that happen, especially when you're savvy on the internet, which I know you're not, Dad. But there are people out there that are. They're cyber thieves.
A lot of people would look at my house and say, we didn't know that y'all just had a tornado. And there was no tornado.
You're like those say the tornado came through and did a few $1,000s worth of improvements.
Yeah.
Most time people may not look at your house and want to steal it, but they look at other people's and say the main thing they want to steal in your house is worth something, Dad, because you have a lot of equity in it. You own your home. So that's what they're looking for. They go in, they steal your title. You've got equity, and so they borrow money against your equity that you paid your home off for. So you want to be able to protect yourself from this. The way you do that is go to HometitleLock.com. You register your address. You make sure that you still do own your home and your title. You enter the code RADIO, and they're going to give you 30 days of free protection, so you can try them out. That's HometitleLock.com. Use the code RADIO to make sure you own your home.
It's groups of individuals of various ethnicities that are after me. I'm running, they're catching up, and it's quite the scrap for a few minutes there. All the time. I dream like that. Groups are chasing me, and I'm trying to outrun them. But it's quite the rigmarole, according to Miss Kay.
Which is why he needs 12 hours, because he's got a lot of battles to fight out.
Yeah, that's why you need 12 hours of sleep.
We spent a lot of that time in battle, so he needs some rest up time.
That's right.
I've heard some of the stories. And unfortunately, Mom has been represented in real time as one of those people trying to get you.
That's right.
So one time you were trying to peel, somebody was stepping on your hand, and you were trying to peel off the fingers, which
I'm hanging on a cliff. I'm hanging just off of a cliff, and they're stomping my fingers, and I'm trying to get my feet up where I can kick them back off of me, where I can come back over that ledge, But I look her up, and it's her saying, "Whoa, whoa!"
And he's peeling Mom's fingers as he's in his dream. He's peeling the toes of his oppressor. But in real life, it's Mom's fingers, which are happening.
Maybe you need to talk to a counselor.
Some have recommended more of a shrink.
Well, so I don't know. So what's your takeaway from all your alarm issues? Now you're set. You're good to go.
Yeah, I'm good to go. I mean, for what I'm saying is for $4 and
I was going to say for $5, maybe you can pick one up for Dad.
Yeah. You know what? I'll go up there and see.
Christmas, $4, $5.
It's the season, Jase.
It is the most annoying. I mean, it was just crazy how annoying this was, and it triggered those dogs. I thought, this is amazing. And Missy, she didn't like it.
That's right.
She didn't, because it woke her up.
We're going in there a text when you get to when you finally do where Jesus meets the Pharisees. He says about 3 or 4 times, Matthew 16, he will be betrayed by a certain group of individuals. They're identified. Must go to Jerusalem, suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, the most religious people on the face of the earth.
Where you
Jesus said, I'm in Matthew 16, the most religious people, he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life. And the alarm clock says, yep. So you got 17, Jase. He's going to be betrayed into the hands of men, he says, but he's already identified them. Chapter 20, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and teachers of the law. So when you turn another page or two, the people that had been identified as the murderers, they're the ones he's talking to. He's talking to the murderers, and he's predicted it called them by name. You're the ones that are going to betray me. What they didn't know, it would save the world and even them. When finally Jesus dies, is buried and raised from the dead, and he finally leaves after showing everybody, Acts chapter 1, Luke informs the world that after his suffering, he talking about the kingdom. He did many things to convince them he was alive. So a lot of those Jews that had said crucify him in Acts chapter 2, Peter sitting there, the one with the kingdom, gates to the kingdom, the keys, and it looks, well, lo and behold, some of them were like, we killed the author of life, we killed the Messiah, and he's going to save us by his death, and we're going to kill him not knowing this is the way it was going to go down. You talk about a story on how that all came together. It simply is amazing.
Yep.
A lot of them, they were cut to the heart because they said, good night. We're sitting there, crucify him, just mob. Well, Jesus had Peter be the one who also said, you're never going to die. No way, and he said, get behind me, Satan. So he was having...
That's what I was fixed to bring up. But
all that friction out for all these blessings to come, and by his death, he would destroy the ones who murdered him. And save the ones who murdered him. He said, I'm going to save you, and this is what you just did. I mean, you just think about that. They were like, what in the world?
Well, in Matthew 16, when he said that, because he said the elders, the priests, the teachers of the law, they have to understand that he's going to be handed to them.
Yep.
And that he must be killed on the third day, be raised alive. So Peter said, well, never.
But see, the prophets,
this will never happen.
Remember the prophets. The prophets had said, like Isaiah 53, you read them, he's going to appear like a root out of dry ground. He's going to die, be pierced for our sins, but there'll be a burial in the rich man's tomb. Yeah. Well, all of that, Al, had to be fulfilled for him to be who he said he was. Right. The fulfillment of all of what the prophet said. Well, you just think about a couple of thousand years later, hundreds at least of years later, 700, 800, what the prophets were saying. You're like, man, what a way to get something proven to be true. He fulfilled every text that said who he is, where he'd be born, what they would call him, what he would do, who would kill him, how they would kill him. You just look at it and you say, man, there's a lot of stuff coming together at the same time. And during the Roman Empire, 2020 to 2030, 34 years, all this went down. You talk of 33, 34, you talk about a happening. That was a happening now.
Well, and that's probably the number one word that Matthew uses throughout the whole book is fulfillment. Fulfillment of the law, fulfillment of the prophecy, fulfillment of the law. All these different things that are there.
This is to fulfill what was written.
That's what Peter said. You called it a happening, and Peter said, this shall never happen to you. Verse 22. But what I find interesting is when he said, get behind me, Satan, you're a stumbling block to me. He then said, why? He said, you don't have in mind the things of God, but the things of men.
Yep.
And you think about what's the number one thing that people accuse their lack of belief in God over. It's usually, well, why do people die? Or why do bad things happen to good people? And
that's right. Because
they're in the mind of men, death is always negative. And that's why Peter said, well, this will never happen. You're not going to die. And he's like, if he would have listened a little more careful, and I'm not picking on Peter because we have the same problem because we tend to think like the mind of men. You go to the doctor and they say, oh, you got 2 weeks to live. What happens? Panic.
Yeah.
You're like, oh no, what happened?
What happened?
Well, you knew that in the back of your mind that was going to happen. Just like the reason we didn't panic when the coronavirus hits is you're like, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? You could die. Well, for us, okay.
It's going to happen at some point.
Yeah, at some point, I'm dying of something. I could be on the way to get my mask and my vaccine shot and have a wreck and die. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, you're just being crazy. No, that's a reality. It happened. I mean, if you look at the deaths that happen in the world every day, it's a staggering number. Staggering. Mm-hmm. So when you look at it from God's perspective, if death is not a problem, in actuality, in this case, it was an answer to a problem.
That is correct.
Which is why we have the mind of God. See, my phone is ringing, and you don't hear it.
I thought you said it turned off.
So how did you know it was ringing?
Well, I felt it. It does a slight vibration, but no sound. Hear it? Same thing the alarm does.
Right, nothing.
So if you put it against a piece of wood, it might go zzz.
Jase, always remember this. Too high tech. Too high tech.
No, but we just have a problem.
There's enough trouble in the world without you saying, "Did it buzz my leg a while ago?"
Well,
I don't want to get any devices.
The upgrade of the phone caused, like right now against this phone.
I've got a creature that's sick to bite me on the leg if my leg is pulsating while I'm just sitting there.
Well, if I made a list of woes for this phone, I wouldn't have 7. I'd have 2. One is there's some you have quick access to bad material here.
Yeah, I don't like it.
That's one. Whoa. And I mean whoa as in whoa. And 2, I don't have any sound. That's a whoa. Because what's the use in having it if it doesn't make a sound?
Working, right?
You're getting to my point.
So we're headed to 7. I guess when I get to 7, I'll probably get a new phone.
Yep.
Right now we just have 2.
Or you could just throw it in the water like that and be done with it. Just have people
chunk it. Too much trouble.
$1,200. Would you chunk $1,200 in the water and just say,
I wouldn't spend $1,200 on something like that. It's going to do more than what it's doing, vibrating on my leg. That ain't worth $1,200, Jase.
It's the value of the vibration.
I actually agree with that. I mean, $1,200. That's
a lot of money.
Steep.
Let's take a break. So one of the things we enjoy on the set of Unashamed is our Black Rifle coffee. Murdered Out is our particular flavor we like because it's the double black because we like it strong. But they have coffee for every palate. So they're really good guys. It's a veteran-owned coffee company. They serve premium coffee. Their veteran and CEO and founder is a man named Evan Hafer. He spent over 7 years on the ground overseas with special forces and as a CIA contractor. So this guy knows his way around a foxhole and around the world. And he's decided to make great coffee. They donate a lot of coffee to servicemen, to first responders. So they've got a great heart for people. We like that. Make your holidays better by giving the gift of Black Rifle Coffee. Go to blackriflecoffee.com/Phil today. Check out the best coffee in America. They got the coffee club. They got gift subscriptions. They have gift cards. They got a lot of premium coffee. Check them out. Go to blackriflecoffee.com/Phil. Use the code Phil at checkout. You're going to receive 20% off your coffee, apparel, and gear, as well as 20% off your first month of the coffee club. Make your holidays better with Black Rifle Coffee.
My first truck
is the next one you get, will it top $1,200? I'm just guessing that it is. I mean,
I don't know the current prices of Phil phones.
No, the problem that happens, Dad, is Jase described it. So you get a phone, it works. You figure out how to make it work. Then they upgrade it.
What about a person who goes through life?
They make it better by destroying it. Then you got to buy a new phone.
What about a person who goes through life and he never is awakened or disturbed by buzzing sounds? He's a thing with him that he doesn't have that thing.
Yeah.
So he's not tuned into it at all. Would it be more peaceful without it than with it? Just a question.
I don't know.
Most people have a cell phone, and I said, would it be more peaceful for you if you didn't have that to worry with, to talk to start, to finish, to charge? Would it be just better just roll through life?
You'd probably be more peaceful and less informed.
Yeah.
And less.
But less informed about what? I mean, you say, well, you wouldn't know anything about the stock market. I said, that just kills me. I mean, you don't know anything about the robbery, the murder, the killing, the shooting, the rapings, the pillage.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know as much if you didn't have
also
this.
don't know what time.
And look, you see pictures, women gyrating. I'm just saying.
Technically, you get the same thing from a
I
television.
just smell trouble coming out of that thing, but maybe I'm wrong, looking at it wrong. They say, yeah, but you got to get informed, son. I said, women jumping up around and doing what they're doing. I said, look, it's just
valid point.
Okay.
I'll give you a check on that. Checkmate. Check.
Jase gives the red check on that one.
Check.
So.
He moved the night to check.
Right.
Okay.
So where were we?
I don't know. My phone started ringing. It was chaos.
What about
I was thinking, sound the alarm. Jesus, we're right almost to where Jesus dies.
Why don't you read? Just start, instead of reading it all, you can get a big chunk of it. Just start in Matthew 23 and start verse 16. Woe to you, blind guides.
Well, there's 7 woes.
7 woes.
And I think we left off
Because this is brutal.
Well, we set it up.
Well, he says, you got to remember, the biggest problem here is that these people that he's addressing right here were elevating themselves rather than their Lord and Creator.
Right.
They wanted to look holy.
They said it was all about how
holy.
I look.
I worry because I love them. I worry about modern day Jews who have access to these texts. And I'm just worried about them that when they read these texts about themselves, the ones who are still waiting on the Messiah in the world, go to modern day Israel and stand up and get the best minds you have, religious people, and say, look, y'all, this Messiah, he was a Jew through and through. His disciples were Jews. He's talking to them right here. Don't be like these people, but they are like these people.
Well, but when we had the guest speaker
Joseph
a month
Schumann.
ago, he had a number of these type teachers of the law and Pharisees.
Because he lives in Israel. He is a Jew, and yet he believes in Christ.
I love them because I know my heritage come from the Jews. My salvation comes from the Jews.
He had a list of one after another who did put their faith in Jesus. So it doesn't. I mean,
I'm grafted in. You all are too. Gentiles grafted into the Jewish tree. They're the root of the tree. That Romans 12 and 13 in there. Over there, you say, well. But the ones that were targeted to be the author of salvation are the Jews. But you read these woes and you're like, good night.
But you think about it, though, Dad. Think about it, though. That's only the Jews were only to get Jesus here. Jesus himself said we go all the way back to Abraham, which is pre-Jew, that says we are people of faith. I mean, Abraham was the father of the faithful.
Yeah.
So really, we've been joined together in the notion of faith from even before Judaism. Jesus came along because the Jews carried him through their heritage.
Yeah.
And that's the reason he chose to come that way.
The seed line, the timeline was all Jewish.
That's right.
And there were a lot of people when I went to Israel that it was evident they embraced Jesus as Lord. I mean, it was a part of the fabric of society.
Right.
Know? So I'm just saying, I'm taking a more positive spin on it because, I mean, God wants everybody to be saved. That is the overall arching message of this. Now, I think he chose a nation just like he chose a temple in the Old Testament. He was giving you the shadow that he wants to have relationships with people.
Right.
I mean, that was in every situation where God dwelled in a nation, in a temple, on a mountain, he wanted to connect with people. And that eventually brought Jesus the ultimate way to connect.
So how do you describe Jesus being so, this is almost the names he's calling them, snakes, brood of vipers,
hypocrites.
Hypocrites. He's using wordage that he's been. It seems rather brutal.
Well, he says in verse 33, "How will you escape from being condemned to hell?" That's pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward.
But I think it's all. But he's making the case. Remember that I've made the case for who I am. If you reject me, you have no way in.
He's still saying he is the way, right? I guess you're right. I mean, he's saying in amongst all that, look, I am the way.
And I think he's using graphic language. I love the way he described it, actually, Dad. Your fear and worries are no different than Jesus's were. You remember when he rode into town and into Jerusalem? When you read the Luke account of that, he wept.
Yeah.
I mean, he looked at it and said, Jerusalem, because he saw what was going to happen in 40 years down the road, and he thought, man, you're going to miss it unless you. I mean, he only wept a couple of times in the Bible the time we read about it. So he felt that way about his people too. And then Paul said, I would rather be cut off and accursed and let you make it. I mean, that's how much he longed for the Jewish people too. Yeah. So you're not the only one that's had a heart for that. Jesus did, and so did Paul.
Remember,
Let's take a break, Dan. Yeah. A lot of people have asked us or asked me, what's probably the best part about knowing, being famous and being able to go speak and do all the things we get to do. My thing that I always point back to is the people that we get to meet in the process. I mean, we met a lot of people that impact us. We had Kaylee McEnany on the podcast. You meet people that are making a difference. And one of the families that's made a big difference to us is the Franklin Graham and his family. They have an organization called Samaritan's Purse, and they've been serving for over 50 years as an international relief organization. So they do it all in the name of Jesus. When coronavirus hit New York, they're right there with their medical team. They'll help anybody at any time because they're really Jesus's hands and feet as they go out and share. And one of the things they do is for Samaritan's Purse is they do a box that they send around the world. It's a shoebox full of things that impact children. And Si and I have done that before too. So we really support these guys. We want you to support them as well. Go to SamaritansPurse.org/unashamed to make a donation that's going to change the lives of those that they work with. That's SamaritansPurse.org/unashamed to make a donation. We really stand behind these guys, and they have a great organization. Check them out.
It starts off saying he was talking to the crowds and to his disciples. And then he made a transition in verse 8 because, he started saying the Pharisees, they like the places of honor and they tie up heavy loads, but they won't, lift a finger. They're hypocrites, basically. They don't practice what they preach. They love to be greedy in the marketplace. But then he looked at the disciples in the crowd and said, but you are not to be called rabbi, for you only have one master and our brother. So it's not like this whole thing was directed at just them, because he made a practical application. When you go around, remember who you're representing. This is not about you. So he did take this little time out in verse 8 to 12. That's what I was going to read, because it says, the greatest, verse 11, among you will be your servant. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Now, to me, that's the global message to all humanity, past, present, and future, no matter what nationality. There's a central theme and rule to this whole thing that applies to not only Pharisees, teachers of the law, the crowds, the disciples, modern day religion, future generations. And is it not true? For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Right. I guess that's what the point I was trying to get to, is I was saying it's not just about the Pharisees. He's just making an example of, I would say, the majority, maybe, if you wanted to get a number. So then he comes up with 7 woes. All right.
The first one's 13 and 14.
Yep. Woe to you, teachers of the law, Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the kingdom of heaven in men's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Well, so let's just keep in our global principle, for whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. If you're making judgments on people's salvation based on who you think you are, as in exalted to a point, I would say that would be a dangerous thing to be doing. Based on
well, look, he says what he's the redneck way of saying is, don't block the door to the kingdom.
Yeah, so always err on the side of grace.
The way you act, if you're blocking the door to the kingdom, how many people have you heard, and this is outside of Judaism, but this is in modern day Christianity, how many people have you heard say, well, yeah, I just gave up on all that because there was, that thing, the church was full of hypocrites, so I'm out. I mean, I hear it a lot. Now, that may not be fair. I mean, it may just be some person's heart, but I'm saying, however you're living and acting, what people see in your life is blocking the door to the kingdom, then you need to change.
Or if you just say you're not welcome here, or
we don't recognize you.
The only thing in the Bible that you can make a point on is if somebody, you go to 1 and 2 Corinthians, where you have someone living a sinful lifestyle openly in the name of Jesus, open rebellion. And I don't mean where if there's any doubt, you offer forgiveness in God's grace and you welcome people into the kingdom. But if there's someone openly living a sinful lifestyle, claiming to be a follower of Jesus, you say, well, wait a minute here. And you're not necessarily blocking them out of the kingdom. You're just saying, this is obvious, because Galatians 5:19 says the acts of sinful nature are obvious. But I mean, that's the one exception. In this case, that's not what was going on. They were, for whatever reason, he's already said they weren't trying to lift a finger to help people. And now they're appointed themselves as God-like, and they're saying who's in and who's out based on what, Al?
Oh, well, they're
whatever.
And
he goes on to say you travel over land and sea to win a single convert.
This is the second one.
Well, this is the second one.
Yeah.
Let's go on over. You travel land and sea to win a single convert, and when he becomes one, you make this is rough.
This is tough.
You make him twice as much a son of hell as you are.
That's
now,
bold.
this is the hellfire and brimstone version. But I will say this. You know, what do? If you skip to modern day, we point people to Jesus and offer grace. We don't know men's hearts and thoughts. You know, Jesus does. And so what I have a problem is when men who have exalted themselves try to preach a sermon like this.
Right.
It doesn't usually end well.
And look, what he's talking about is, from the Jewish perspective, is the word is proselytize people that from other countries to accept Judaism, accept Yahweh, God, accept the law. And so he's saying you go to all this trouble to get somebody in to understand who God is, and then you turn around and make them think it's about them like you think it's about you. In other words, what he's saying is don't draw people to yourself for the way you're acting. You got to do something bigger than that. And he says it in a bold way.
Yeah.
You know?
All right, this next one's a little more difficult. So the next one says, woe to you, this verse 18, blind guides, you say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath. You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You may also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift on it, he is bound by it. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And he who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it.
Now, to me, it's a lot. He says a lot, but you can boil it down to one simple thing. Don't value a gift more than the one the gift is given to. I mean, the idea is they were looking at everything coming in and seeing more value in that than who it was given to, which is...
That's why I came up with the refrigerator salesman, which was kind of ha. But if it's not plugged into a power source, you've missed it. It's not going to work.
Well, it won't
and
work.
You can argue about all the features on why this one is better and what it can do. But in the end, you know, it comes down to you have one job, and it better be a function of you being plugged into the power source who gives all life.
And now this is one. Let's take a break. This is one, Jase, that modernizes quite well because we hear this a lot. If it's more about the gift and the giving and the building and the how nice everything is and the more flashy everything, if it becomes about all those things instead of who we're worshiping, which, let's face it, it happens.
It happens.
Then you're missing the point of what he's saying. The gift can't
back
be
to the
held
who.
higher than God.
That's right.
I mean, I've said it thousands of times when somebody says, you know, if I just had a miracle, I would believe. I'm like, you have one who offered himself, and he works miracles. He's bigger than the miracle. Or if they say, you know, if I just had a nice house, we have one who can build you a house. Yeah. He's a house builder. If you just do that in every situation, it always works. It always goes back to the one who should be exalted and the one who should be humble. God should be exalted. We should be humble.
Yep.
All the stuff in between doesn't matter. So next one, verse 20 3. Woe to you, teachers of the law, Pharisees, hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, he names them, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel.
That's a great illustration. You're after the little things, but then you swallow the big one. Well, you know what I find
self-explanatory.
It's interesting about that, Jase, is he says the more important matters of the law, and then he talks about justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You don't typically put those 3 concepts in with law, but it shows you how that's what's most important, that what's right and what's good. So the way I put it is don't major in minors. I mean, so many people spend so much time living out the minors and they miss the major.
That is true.
It happens all the time. And so it's happening for those guys too. Or do the next one, Dave.
All right, 25. Woe to you, teachers of the law, Pharisees, hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they're full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean.
So do 27, 28, because this is really a part 1 and part 2.
It says the same thing. It says, you are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of dead men's bones and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside, you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside, you're full of hypocrisy and wickedness.
So, I think when I think of this one, I think of the idea, like when I was in Boston earlier this year, people were out there just combing the cemeteries because, there were all these famous patriots buried there that we read about in American history and all that. And I was watching them walk around, everybody's reading the stuff, and I thought, just like what he's talking about, everybody was interested in the tombstone and who it says was here, but nobody was thinking that it was just underneath was just what was left of bones and whatever. Not so illustrious. That's the way he described who we are if we focus on the outside and not the inside, which was the whole point.
Back to my refrigerator illustration. So let's say you have your refrigerator full of food and you accidentally or something happens where it's unplugged. Now on the outside, and even the smell, there might be a hint. You wouldn't smell it, but you would think, whoa, what a beautiful refrigerator. But when you opened it up, especially after a couple of weeks in the hot summertime, I've known that when the hurricane went through.
Oh, yeah.
My refrigerator looked fine. And I just thought, well, maybe if I'll keep the door closed, it'll keep it cool.
No.
When I popped that thing open after about 3 or 4 days, an immediate gag reflex happened. Just all ruined. But you never would have known it by looking. And I mean, when you look at people's lives, we don't know that. So when you go to church, guess what? There are hypocrites sitting all around you. It's part of the deal. And it's not our job to try to police them all. I mean, we don't know. We offer grace and forgiveness. They've got to stumble up on these types of passages in Jesus' sermon and say, you know what? Who am I trying to kid? I got dead man's bones here. Yeah. Wickedness, evil. I mean, I think that's obvious that that's going on, but it's not obvious who those people are. This is where it comes to each person is responsible for their relationship with God. And be honest, you may fool us, you may fool the church, but you're not going to fool God.
Yeah, and again, that's a great modernization when you see people that only are focused on how they look. They'll say, I go to church, I do this, I do that, and they'll mention the handful of things that are seen. But what about the inside of who you are? I mean, are you really all in on Jesus?
And it's hard for people to recognize it because you get so in the habit of acting one way in front of a group of people, and then you have to have a moment somewhere where you're like, what am I doing?
That's right. Honest assessment.
Yes, you got to be staring at the ceiling one night thinking, who am I trying to kid? Right. You're not going to kid the omnipotent, almighty God. It's not going to work.
Right.
And based on hearing this, that would be terrible if you live a lie your whole Christian life. And I mean, just inwardly, you're self-indulgent and wicked, and then you stand before God. Can you imagine that encounter? Mm-hmm. I would not want that. So next one, woe to you. You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous, and you say, well, now this is just famous humanity here. Mm-hmm. Tell you what. If we had lived in the days of our forefathers, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of the sin of your forefathers.
Ooh, that's harsh.
But look, we've been doing. Everybody's hindsight is 20/20. If I tell you what, and if that had been me, I mean that's a famous human flaw, is to say what you would have done.
But what he's showing them is the same spirit that was there throughout all of Jewish history. When God would raise somebody up that had a message they didn't like, that their answer was, shut him up. And now we're getting to Jesus, and he's the fulfillment of all those prophets. And he goes into that next section of text saying, you're about to do that to me.
That's right.
Because I am the one.
But I'm saying there's an underlying point here. People always love to look at other people's flaws or missteps and say, well, I wouldn't have done that. But why don't you just look at yourself? What do you need to do instead of looking back saying, well, we wouldn't have done that? I mean, look, would it have been a struggle if you put us in this situation back in a day where all of a sudden the Savior of the world comes in a manger from a town that's not known for anything, and he built houses and he's claiming to be the Son of God? It would have been a difficult venture to say, you know what? I'm going with this.
That's right.
So, okay. So then he calls them snakes again in verse 33. How will you escape being condemned to hell? I think the answer to that was you're not going to escape unless something, repentance here. Therefore, I'm sending you prophets and wise men and teachers. Some of them you kill, crucify, others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue them from town to town. So
which they're going to do.
Yep. Well, so upon you will come the righteous blood that has been shed on earth. And he goes back to what happened to Abel, to Zechariah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. I tell you the truth.
And 36, this is the key verse.
This is a key verse because it says, this will come upon this generation.
It's going to happen in the near future.
O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. And then he gets into this, signs of the end of the age is what my little title says, but it actually, he addresses Jerusalem's temple. Where's that verse at in here where it says, he said verse 2, of chapter 24, do you see all these things? Yes, I tell you the truth, not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down.
It sounds like Stephen in Acts chapter 7.
Yep.
The Most High does not live in houses made by men. As the prophet says, heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. What kind of house will you build for me?
Right.
He's
already referenced about the stones too, that he is the temple and that when he's going to raise
he
them.
He did that in John. But I just want to say, a lot of people go to Matthew 24 and 25 and 26, which is what's coming up, and they talk about when Jesus comes back from the future of right now. But, when you read 23 and he addresses all these religious leaders, and then he singles out Jerusalem, verse 37 and 23, and then 24, you're actually pointing to the temple and saying, well, there was a historical event that happened in AD 70, and we'll talk about that next time.
Right.
But one thing I'm sure of, that's part of the judgment that he's addressed. What happened in AD 70 is part of the upcoming judgment.
No doubt about it.
And you're right, because he sets it up in verse 34 and 35 when he says, you're going to do this to this next generation, meaning his disciples and the believers. So we'll get into it. I'll say this as we close, that last woe, the way I put it is, whatever you do, don't miss Jesus. I mean, that's the final woe. Don't miss Jesus, because that's what they're missing. So we'll come back and expand further next time. Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.